Hello everyone, I'm Ni Ping. Welcome to another video in the chapter of data collection methods. In this video, we will discuss biophysiological measures, which are another very important data collection approach in nursing studies. In nurses' work settings, there is a wide variety of technical instruments for measuring physiological functions. Nurse researchers have used biophysiological measures for a wide variety of purposes. For example, purposes include studying the basic biophysiological processes, exploring the ways in which nursing actions or interventions affect physiological outcomes, evaluating the accuracy of biophysiological information gathered by nurses, and exploring correlation of physiological functioning the patients with health problems. These are all the purposes in the studies. And the goal of this video is to present an overview of biophysiological measures. We are going to discuss types of biophysiological measures, selecting a biophysiological measure, and the advantages and disadvantages of evaluating biophysiological measures. Now let's discuss the types of biophysiological measures, which include in vivo measures and in vitro measures. First, what are the in vivo measures? In vivo measurements are performed directly in a living organism. For example, measures of oxygen saturation, blood pressure, and body temperature are in vivo measurements. How are the vivo measurements used in the nursing research? Here is an example. A study tested the effectiveness of a 5% oral solution on several outcomes in infants undergoing intramuscular injection. In addition to assessing the impact on pain, the researchers measured the effect of solution on oxygen saturation and heart rate. What are the vitro measurements? In vitro measurement, by contrast, is performed outside the organism's body. And in the case of measuring serum potassium concentration in the blood, within vitro measures, data are gathered by extracting physiological material from people and submitting it for laboratory analysis. Usually, each laboratory establishes a range of normal values for each measurement, and this information helps in interpreting the results. There are several classes of laboratory analysis which have been used by nurse researchers, including chemical measurements, microbiological measurements, and cytological and histological measures. Laboratory analysis of blood and urine samples are the most frequently used in vitro measures in nursing investigations. Here is an example of a study with in vitro measures. Researchers studied the effects of a community health worker-led lifestyle behavior intervention for women using a randomized design. The researchers used a number of outcome variables in the trial, including lipid and blood glucose measurements. So the next section is about how to select a biophysiological measure in nursing studies. The most basic issue in selecting a physiological measure is whether it will yield good information about key research variable. In some cases, researchers need to consider whether the variable should be measured by other measures. For example, stress could be measured by asking people the question. For example, using the state trait anxiety inventory, or by observing their behavior during exposure to stressful stimuli, or by measuring heart rate, blood pressure, or by measuring in urine samples. Now, let's move to the advantages and disadvantages of evaluating biophysiological measures. The first advantage is that outcomes are accurate and precise compared with physiological measures. For example, self-report measures of anxiety. The second of advantages evaluating biological measures in studies is objective. Two researchers reading from the same instruments are likely to obtain the same blood pressure measurements, and two different instruments are likely to produce the same results. Patients cannot easily distort measurements of biophysiological function. The third advantage is evaluating biological measures in studies is that the measures can provide valid measures of targeted variables. For example, thermometers can be depended on to measure temperature and not blood volume, and so forth. For self-report and observational measures, it's often more difficult to be certain that the instrument is really measuring the target concept. Next is about the disadvantages. The first one is the cost of collecting some types of biological data. The cost may be low or non-existent, but when laboratory tests are involved, they may be more expensive than other methods. For example, assessing smoking status by means of assessing continuous assay versus self-report. The measuring tool may affect the variables it's attempting to measure. The presence of a sensing device, such as a transducer located in blood vessel, partially blocks that vessel and hence alters the pressure flow characteristics being measured. Physiological measures are plentiful, often highly reliable and valid, and extremely useful in clinical using studies. Care must be exercised, however, in selecting instruments or laboratory analysis with regard to practical, ethical, medical, and technical considerations. Okay, those are all for the biophysiological measures. In the next video, we are going to discuss another important data collection method, the existing healthcare data. Thank you very much.